3 minutes? That's how long it took for a single American pilot to prove that everything the Luftwaffe believed about air superiority was a lie. But what happened in those 3 minutes wasn't just a dogfight. It was something far more terrifying. January 1944. The skies over Germany are frozen and gray. Somewhere below those clouds, hundreds of American bombers are bleeding, burning, falling. The Luftwaffe is tearing them apart, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. For 2 years, the Germans have owned these skies. Their fighters are faster, more experienced, more deadly. American bomber crews know the statistics. 50% won't survive their tour. Some won't make it through their first mission. And on this particular morning, deep in enemy territory, one bomber group is about to learn why. The B-17s are flying in tight formation, 20,000 feet above the German countryside. Inside those metal tubes, young men from Iowa and Texas and Pennsylvania are trying not to think about the cold. Trying not to think about the empty seats from yesterday's mission. The frost on the windows is so thick they can barely see out. Their breath comes in visible clouds. Every rivet in the fuselage is covered in ice. The temperature inside the aircraft is 40 degrees below zero. Their oxygen masks are freezing to their faces. Their fingers are numb despite the heavy gloves. Some of them are praying. Some are writing letters in their minds, letters they hope they'll never have to send. All of them are waiting. Then someone sees them. Black dots on the horizon. Moving fast. The radio crackles to life, but the words are unnecessary. Every man in every bomber already knows. Fighters. Dozens of them. Maybe more. The Luftwaffe is coming, and they're coming angry. The gunners scramble to their positions, but their hands are shaking. Not from cold. From something else. Something deeper. The German pilots have been doing this for years. They know exactly where to hit a B-17 to kill it fastest. They know how to approach from the sun. How to scatter a formation. How to turn brave men into burning wreckage in seconds. They've done it hundreds of times. And today, they're doing it again. Their Focke-Wulf 190s and Messerschmitt 109s are painted in winter camouflage, gray and white, almost invisible against the clouds. They're closing in at over 400 miles per hour, and they're not slowing down. The first B-17 goes down before most gunners can even find their targets. One moment it's there, engines roaring, holding formation. The next moment its wing is gone. Just gone. Severed by a burst of 20mm cannon fire that tears through aluminum like paper. The plane rolls over, almost gracefully, and begins its long fall to earth. No parachutes. No time. 9 men who were alive 10 seconds ago are now just falling metal and fire. The crew of the bomber flying next to it watches the whole thing happen. They watch their friends die. And they know they could be next. The Luftwaffe pilots don't even watch it crash. They're already lining up their next kill. Another burst. Another B-17 shudders and begins trailing smoke. Its number 3 engine is on fire, and the flames are spreading. The pilot tries to maintain formation, but the plane is dying. He gives the order to bail out, and one by one, the crew members leap into the frozen void, their parachutes blooming white against the gray sky. The empty bomber continues on for another mile before it finally rolls over and spirals down. But what they don't know, what they can't possibly know, is that something new is coming. Something that's been flying for almost an hour, searching for them. Something that's about to change the rules of this war forever. The P-51 Mustang. Most people have never heard the sound it makes. That deep, angry roar of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. It doesn't sound like other American fighters. It sounds like rolling thunder. Like a predator. Like something that was built for only one purpose, to hunt and kill. And right now, 300 miles deep in German territory, a formation of Mustangs is racing toward the massacre happening below those clouds. They're flying at maximum speed, their engines pushed to the limit, burning fuel at a rate that terrifies their pilots. But they're coming anyway. The bomber crews don't know they're coming. The Germans definitely don't know. But in about 90 seconds, everyone is going to find out. Inside the lead Mustang, a young captain named James is scanning the horizon. He's 23 years old. He's been in combat for 6 weeks. His hands are steady on the stick, but his heart is hammering in his chest because he knows what he's about to do has never been done before. No American fighter has ever penetrated this deep into Germany. No one has ever tried to take on the Luftwaffe this far from home. The fuel calculations say they have maybe 10 minutes before they have to turn back. 10 minutes to find the bombers. To save whoever's left. His wingmen are spread out around him, 3 other Mustangs, each one carrying a pilot who's just as scared and just as determined as he is. Then he sees the smoke. Black pillars of it, rising from below the clouds. Each pillar marks where AB-17 used to be. Where 70 young men used to be. James counts 5 pillars. 6. 7. The massacre is still happening down there, and he's about to fly straight into the middle of it. James keys his radio. His voice is calm, almost cold. Bandits below. Going down. He pushes the stick forward, and the Mustang responds like it's been waiting for this moment its entire existence. The engine screams. The world tilts. And suddenly they're diving through 6,000 feet of frozen air toward a battle that's already being lost. The German pilots see them coming, but they don't believe it. It's impossible. American fighters can't be here. They don't have the range. They never have the range. One of the Luftwaffe pilots actually laughs when he first spots them, thinking they must be lost, thinking they'll turn back any second. But those aren't phantoms dropping out of the clouds. Those are P-51s, and they're moving faster than anything the Germans have ever seen. And they're not turning back. What happens next lasts 3 minutes and 17 seconds. But those 3 minutes will be talked about for the next 80 years. James spots his target immediately. A Focke-Wulf 190, one of Germany's best fighters, pulling up from a kill run on a crippled B-17. The German pilot is confident, almost lazy in his movements. He's done this 1,000 times. He's an ace, probably with 15 or 20 kills to his name. He has no idea what's screaming down at him from above. No idea that his war is about to end. The Mustang closes the distance in seconds. James doesn't fire yet. He's too far out. The cold air is screaming past his canopy so loud he can barely hear himself think. His gloved hands are gripping the stick so hard they hurt. Everything his training taught him is running through his mind in a loop. Lead the target. Short bursts. Conserve ammunition. But there's something else too. Something they didn't teach him. Something darker. He knows that German pilot just killed 9 Americans. Maybe more. And he's about to return the favor. 500 yards. 400. 300. The Focke-Wulf still hasn't seen him. The German pilot is too focused on his next target, already lining up another bomber. James centers the gun sight, takes a breath, and squeezes the trigger. 650 caliber machine guns roar to life simultaneously. The Mustang shudders from the recoil. The tracers cut through the frozen air like fire through paper, a stream of glowing death that connects his aircraft to the enemy's. And the German fighter disintegrates. Not crashes. Not goes down. Disintegrates. 1 second it's a functional war machine. The next it's scattered metal tumbling toward the earth. The pilot never knew what hit him. Never had time to be afraid. He was alive, and then he wasn't. The other German pilots see it happen. And for the first time in this war, they feel something unfamiliar. Fear. Because suddenly the Americans aren't the hunted anymore. The sky becomes chaos. Mustangs and German fighters twist and turn in a 3-dimensional dance of death that's impossible to follow with the naked eye. The bomber crews watch from above, unable to help, unable to look away. It's the most beautiful and terrible thing most of them have ever seen. Tracers are cutting through the clouds in every direction, red and white and yellow streams of light that mark the path of bullets traveling at 3,000 feet per second. Planes are burning. Falling. Exploding in midair with a flash and a boom that can be felt more than heard. And through it all, the Mustangs are doing something no one thought possible. They're winning. Another Focke-Wulf tries to run. Bad choice. A Mustang is faster. Always faster. The German pilot pushes his throttle to maximum, diving for the deck, hoping speed and low altitude will save him. It won't. The Mustang follows him down through 5,000 feet, 4,000, 3,000. The ground is rushing up fast now. Trees and fields and frozen rivers. Small villages where people are looking up, watching the battle, not knowing who's winning or losing, just knowing that death is happening above their heads. The German is pulling up now, too late, too steep. His plane is shaking from the stress. The Mustang fires. A 2-second burst that seems to last forever. The German's engine explodes in a fountain of flame and black smoke, and he augers straight into a snow-covered field at 300 miles per hour. The impact crater will be 20 feet deep. Back at altitude, James is fighting for his life. A Messerschmitt 109 has gotten on his tail, and the pilot is good. Really good. Probably an ace. Probably someone who's been killing Allied pilots since 1940. Someone who's survived 100 combats, and knows every trick in the book. The Germans' cannon shells are tearing through the air inches from James's wings. He can hear them passing, even over the roar of his own engine. Any one of them could end this. Could turn his Mustang into a coffin. Could make him just another name on a casualty list that his mother will receive in a week or two. James throws his plane into a violent roll, then a dive, then a climbing turn that should be impossible at this altitude. His vision grays out. His body weighs 1,000 pounds. The G-forces are crushing him into his seat. But he doesn't black out, and when he levels off, gasping for air, the Messerschmitt has overshot. Now James is behind him. The German pilot knows immediately that he's made a mistake. He knows what's coming. He tries everything. Rolls that nearly tear the wings off his plane. Dives that make his altimeter spin like a clock. Desperate turns that bleed off his speed and make him an easier target with every second. But the Mustang stays with him like they're connected by wire. Like James can read his mind. Like there's no escape and there never was. James is breathing hard now. Sweat is freezing on his face despite the cold. His arms are screaming from the G-forces, from fighting the stick, from the sheer physical effort of keeping his plane where it needs to be. But his aim is steady. He fires. The burst is short. Professional. Surgical. 4 rounds, maybe 5. It catches the Messerschmitt right behind the cockpit, in that vulnerable space where the fuel tank sits, and something critical breaks. Fuel lines. Hydraulics. Maybe both. The German plane begins trailing black smoke, thick and oily, and James knows it's over. He watches the canopy fly off, torn away by the slipstream. Watches the pilot bail out, a tiny figure tumbling through space. Watches the parachute open, a small white flower against the gray sky. The pilot will spend the rest of the war in a prisoner camp, if he's lucky. If angry civilians don't find him first. James doesn't feel triumph. He just feels tired. But it's not over. Not even close. Below him, another Mustang is in trouble. Engine trailing smoke, controls damaged, trying to limp away from 2 German fighters closing in for the kill. The pilot is broadcasting on the radio, his voice tight with fear, asking for help, begging for help. James doesn't think. Doesn't calculate fuel or ammunition or odds. He just dives. The Mustang responds instantly, dropping like a falcon toward the fight below. The 2 German pilots are so focused on their wounded prey they don't see him coming until it's too late. Until he's already there, already firing. James fires on the first one from straight above, a deflection shot that should be impossible to make. The angles are wrong. The speed is wrong. Everything is wrong. But he makes it anyway. The burst walks up the German fighter's fuselage like someone climbing stairs, and suddenly the wing folds, snapped at the root by a .50 caliber round hitting exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. The plane cartwheels out of control, spinning so fast it's just a blur. The second German pilot finally sees James and tries to turn into the attack, but James is already past, already climbing, already gone. The damaged Mustang limps away. Its pilot will make it home. He'll land with a dead engine and a plane that will never fly again, but he'll walk away. He'll live to fly another day because of those 5 seconds. 3 minutes and 17 seconds have passed since the first shot was fired. Please like and subscribe to help us share more forgotten World War II stories. The Luftwaffe pilots who are still alive are retreating now. Not regrouping. Not repositioning for another attack. Retreating. Running. Their radio chatter is frantic, confused, afraid. For the first time in this war, German fighters are fleeing from Americans, and everyone knows what that means. The balance of power just shifted. The rules just changed. And nothing will ever be the same again. The bomber crews watch them go, and inside those frozen metal tubes, men are crying, praying, laughing with relief they don't fully understand yet. Some of them are vomiting from the adrenaline. Some are just sitting in silence, staring at nothing. They're alive. Against every odd, against every statistic, against everything that should have happened, they're still alive. The Mustangs form up around the bombers, and together they turn for home. James looks at his fuel gauge, and his stomach drops. It's terrifyingly low. Lower than it should be. Lower than he thought possible. They're 300 miles deep in enemy territory, and he's got maybe 20 minutes of fuel left. Maybe. If he's lucky. If the winds are right. If he doesn't have to fight again. If nothing else goes wrong. Too many ifs. But something else does go wrong. The radio crackles. One of his wingmen. Engine trouble. Losing power. Can't maintain altitude. The voice is calm, professional, but James can hear the fear underneath. He can hear the resignation. James scans the sky and spots him. Another Mustang, trailing a thin stream of white smoke, falling behind the formation, sinking lower with every second. And James knows what that means. The pilot will have to bail out over Germany. Will have to spend the rest of the war in a POW camp, if he's lucky. If he survives the landing. If he isn't shot by angry civilians who've just watched their cities bombed. If he doesn't freeze to death in the snow before someone finds him. If. James makes a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. He turns back. His wingman sees him coming and immediately keys his radio. Tells him no. Orders him no. Uses every curse word he knows and invents a few new ones. They both know James doesn't have the fuel for this. Doesn't have the time. If he stays, they both die. If he leaves, at least one of them makes it home. The math is simple. The choice should be obvious. But James drops down next to the damaged Mustang anyway and matches its speed. Throttles back. Slows down. He's not leaving. Not today. Not ever. Together they limp west, flying lower and lower as the damaged engine coughs and sputters like a dying animal. They're down to 5,000 feet now. 4,000. Low enough that German anti-aircraft guns can reach them. Low enough that any fighter could bounce them and they'd have nowhere to run, no altitude to trade for speed. The sky is getting darker. Weather moving in from the west. That's good and bad. Good because it hides them from enemy fighters. Bad because they're flying on fumes now, and if they can't find their base through the clouds, if they get lost even for a few minutes, this whole thing ends badly. 3,000 feet. 2,000. James can see individual trees now. Farm buildings. Roads with trucks moving on them. People working in fields who stop and look up as the two Mustangs pass overhead. Some wave. Some don't. You can't tell friend from enemy at this altitude. You can only hope. Can only keep flying and trust that you're headed in the right direction. The damaged Mustang's engine coughs one final time and dies completely. The propeller windmills uselessly in the slipstream, creating drag, pulling the nose down. The pilot has maybe 60 seconds of glide time before he has to put it down. Before he becomes a statistic. But ahead, impossibly, miraculously, there's a field. Flat. Long enough. Maybe. Covered in snow but no trees, no obstacles. The pilot aims for it, and James circles overhead, watching, unable to help, barely able to breathe. His own fuel gauge is on empty now. He's got minutes left. Maybe less. The Mustang touches down hard. Too hard. Bounces 20 feet back into the air. Comes down again. The landing gear collapses immediately, folding up like broken legs, and the plane slides across frozen ground in a shower of sparks and torn metal. It's sliding on its belly now, the propeller digging into the earth, throwing up huge chunks of frozen dirt and snow. It slides for 300 yards. 400. It's not going to stop in time. There's a tree line at the end of the field, massive oaks that have been there for 100 years, and they're coming up fast. Too fast. The Mustang stops 10 feet from the trees. James sees the pilot climb out, moving slow, checking for injuries, finding none. The pilot looks up, finds James circling overhead, and waves. A small wave. A tired wave. A wave that says thank you and goodbye and good luck all at once. James waves back and turns for home. He's got maybe 5 minutes of fuel left. Maybe less. The math says he won't make it. The math says he's going to end up walking home just like his wingman. But he pushes the throttle forward anyway and points the Mustang west, toward England, toward safety, toward home. 15 minutes later, his engine starts cutting out. He's still 50 miles from friendly territory. Still 50 miles from safety. The fuel gauge is on empty. Has been on empty for the last 10 minutes. He's been flying on vapor and prayers, and both are running out. The engine coughs. Catches. Coughs again. This is it. This is how it ends. Not in a ball of fire. Not in a dramatic dogfight. Just running out of gas and falling from the sky like a stone. He starts looking for a place to put down, but there's nothing but forests and hills and frozen rivers below. No good options. No good choices. Just bad and worse. The engine coughs one more time and somehow, impossibly, catches again. Keeps running. Keeps turning the propeller. James doesn't understand it. Doesn't question it. Just keeps flying, keeps pushing west, keeps believing that maybe, just maybe, he'll make it home. His hands are shaking now. His whole body is shaking. Not from cold. From exhaustion. From fear. From relief that he's not sure he's earned yet. He crosses into friendly territory with his propeller still turning. He finds his base through a gap in the clouds, and it's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. The runway. The control tower. The hangars. Home. He lands with his tanks completely dry. The engine dies as he's taxiing to his hard stand, just quits completely, and the Mustang rolls to a stop under its own momentum. When the ground crew checks the fuel system, they find less than a gallon left in the entire aircraft. Less than a gallon after flying over 600 miles, most of it in combat, most of it at full throttle. They ask him how he made it back. He doesn't have an answer. He just shakes his head and walks away, his legs barely holding him up, his hands still trembling. That night, in the debriefing room, the intelligence officers don't believe the reports at first. American fighters 300 miles deep in Germany. Multiple confirmed kills. Bombers saved. Luftwaffe driven off. It's impossible. The numbers don't work. The fuel calculations don't work. Nothing works. Except it happened. They have the gun camera footage. They have the witness statements from bomber crews. They have German fighters scattered across the French countryside to prove it. And it's going to keep happening. Because everything just changed. Before that day, American bombers flew alone into Germany and died in massive numbers. The losses were unsustainable. Some missions lost 30% of their aircraft. 30%. The Army Air Force was running out of bombers faster than they could build them, running out of crews faster than they could train them. After that day, they had escorts. Long-range escorts who could go anywhere the bombers went. Could fight anywhere. Win anywhere. The Luftwaffe had built their entire defensive strategy on the assumption that American fighters couldn't reach them. That assumption was now dead. Within 6 months, the Mustang would achieve air superiority over all of Europe. Within a year, Luftwaffe pilots would refuse to engage them unless they had overwhelming numerical advantage, and even then they'd think twice. The German fighter force, once the most feared in the world, would be systematically destroyed. Not because their pilots weren't brave. Not because their aircraft weren't good. But because the P-51 Mustang was better. Faster. More maneuverable. Longer range. And the men flying them were willing to go places no one thought possible. James flew 63 more combat missions after that day. Each one a roll of the dice. Each one a chance to die. He was shot up twice, forced to bail out once, crash-landed with a dead engine 3 times. But he survived. He survived everything the Luftwaffe could throw at him, everything the war could throw at him, and he came home. Home to a small town in Ohio where nobody knew what he'd done. Where nobody understood. He got married. Had 3 kids. Worked at a hardware store for 40 years. Lived a long, quiet, unremarkable life. He never talked much about those 3 minutes over Germany. When people asked him about the war, he changed the subject. Talk about the weather. Ask about their kids. Tell a joke. Anything but the war. His wife asked him once, early in their marriage, if he'd killed anyone. He looked at her for a long time, and she saw something in his eyes that scared her. Something dark and old and tired. He said yes. She never asked again. But sometimes, late at night, he'd wake up with his heart racing. Covered in sweat even in winter. He'd be back in that cockpit, diving through frozen clouds toward a battle he couldn't win. He'd feel the stick in his hands, responsive and alive. Hear the guns firing, that terrible hammering roar. See the German fighters burning, tumbling, falling. He'd see the faces of men he'd killed, even though he'd never actually seen their faces, never been close enough. His mind invented them anyway. Young faces. Scared faces. Faces that looked just like his. He'd remember the weight of it. The fear that never quite went away, even after he landed, even after the war ended. The exhaustion that went deeper than sleep could fix. The strange, terrible pride of knowing he'd done something that mattered. Something that saved lives. Something that changed the course of history, even if history would never know his name. And he'd remember the men who didn't make it home. The empty chairs at briefings. The bunks that stayed empty. The letters he'd helped pack up, personal effects being shipped to families who never see their sons again. He died in 2003, at the age of 82. Heart attack. Quick and painless, the doctors said. At his funeral, there were maybe 30 people. Family. A few friends from the hardware store. His pastor. And a man nobody recognized. Older. Gray-haired. Walked with a cane. He stood in the back, didn't talk to anyone, just watched the service with tears running down his face. After everyone else had left, after the family had gone, the man walked up to the grave. He stood there for a long time, staring at the headstone, not moving, barely breathing. Finally, the cemetery worker asked if he was okay. Asked if he needed anything. The man smiled. Said he was fine. Said he was a B-17 pilot. Said that in January 1944, somewhere over Germany, a Mustang pilot saved his life. Saved his whole crew. They'd been on fire, going down, minutes from death, and then those fighters showed up out of nowhere. Drove off the Germans. Gave them a chance. They made it home that day, and he flew 28 more missions, and he survived the war, and he had a family, and he lived to be 85 years old. All because of those 3 minutes. Said he never got the chance to say thank you. Never even knew the pilot's name. But he saw the obituary in the paper, saw the mention of P-51 Mustangs and the 8th Air Force, and he knew. He just knew. Said he wanted to say thank you now, even if it was too late. Even if the man who saved his life couldn't hear him. He needed to say it anyway. The question no one asks is this: how many other lives were saved that day? Not just the bombers that made it home. Not just the 9 or 10 crew members in each one. But the missions that came after. The pilots who survived because the Mustangs were there, providing cover, driving off attackers, making the impossible possible. The families who got their sons and husbands and fathers back because one aircraft, flown by men who refused to quit, changed what was possible. The numbers are staggering if you really think about them. If those Mustangs hadn't shown up that day, how many bombers would have been lost? 10? 20? How many would have been lost the next day, and the day after that? How many missions would have been scrubbed because the losses were too high? How would the war have changed if American bombers couldn't operate over Germany? Would it have lasted another year? 2 years? 3 minutes and 17 seconds. That's all it took. 3 minutes to prove that distance didn't matter. That the Atlantic Ocean didn't protect the Third Reich. That fear didn't matter, exhaustion didn't matter, impossible odds didn't matter. That the only thing that mattered was whether you were willing to fly into hell and fight your way back out. The Luftwaffe learned that lesson the hard way. And they never forgot it. Their pilots started refusing missions. Started claiming mechanical problems. Started finding reasons not to fly. Because they knew what was waiting for them up there. But here's what keeps historians awake at night. What if the Mustang had come 6 months earlier? A year earlier? How many bombers would have made it home? How many young men from Iowa and Texas and Pennsylvania and California and New York would have lived to see their 25th birthday? How many families would have stayed whole? How many children would have known their fathers? We'll never know. We can only count the ones who were saved after that day and be grateful it happened when it did. The P-51 Mustang flew its last combat mission in 1953, during the Korean War. By then, jets had made it obsolete. Faster jets. More advanced jets. Jets that could fly higher and faster than any propeller-driven fighter could dream of. But the pilots who flew Mustangs, who fought in them, who survived because of them, they never forgot what it could do. Never forgot what it felt like to have that much power, that much speed, that much capability wrapped around them. They'd fly other aircraft later. Faster ones. More advanced ones. Planes that could break the sound barrier. Planes that could fly to the edge of space. But none of them, not a single one, would ever love another plane the way they loved the Mustang. Because it brought them home. Through flak and fighters and frozen skies and impossible odds, it brought them home. It gave them a chance when they had no right to have one. And in the end, that's all any of them really wanted. Not glory. Not medals. Not their names in history books. Just to make it home. To see the sun rise one more time. To hear their mother's voice. To feel solid ground under their feet. To kiss the girl they left behind. The Mustang gave them that chance. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Somewhere in a museum today, one of those Mustangs sits perfectly restored. Paint gleaming in the artificial lights. Guns empty and cold. Engine silent. Propeller still. Tourists walk past it every day, taking pictures, reading the plaques, learning about range and speed and armament, and kills confirmed. And all of that is true. All of that matters. But what the plaques don't say, what they can't say, is what it felt like to be up there. To be 23 years old and screaming through frozen clouds toward an enemy that wanted you dead. To know that everything you believed about yourself, every story you told yourself about who you were and what you were capable of, was about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. And to pass that test. Not because you were fearless. Not because you were invincible. But because you were more afraid of letting down the men depending on you than you were of dying. Because somewhere inside you, deeper than fear or exhaustion or the rational voice telling you to turn back, there was something else. Something harder to name. Duty, maybe? Or honor? Or just the stubborn refusal to quit that defines certain types of people in certain types of moments. That's what those 3 minutes were really about. Not technology, though the technology mattered. Not tactics, though the tactics mattered. Not even victory, though victory certainly mattered. They were about young men, barely old enough to vote, who decided that some things were worth dying for. And then, miraculously, impossibly, lived anyway. Lived to tell the story? Lived to have families. Lived to grow old and gray and forget sometimes what they'd done, what they'd been part of. The world moved on. The war ended. New wars began. The Mustang was retired, then brought back, then retired again. The men who flew them grew old and died, one by one, until there were none left. But somewhere in the sky over Germany, if you listen carefully on cold January mornings, you can still hear them. The deep roar of Merlin engines pushed to their limits. The chatter of 50 caliber guns firing in perfect synchronization. The sound of history changing direction, one 3-minute battle at a time. The sound of men refusing to quit. The sound of courage that doesn't feel like courage, just like doing what needs to be done because nobody else is going to do it. The sound of 3 minutes that prove that the impossible is only impossible until someone does it. And that sound, once you've heard it, once you understand what it means, never really goes away. It echoes forward through time, through generations, reminding us that ordinary people, in extraordinary circumstances, are capable of extraordinary things. And sometimes, that's the only thing standing between civilization and darkness. 3 minutes? That's all it takes. 3 minutes to change everything.